Okay, everybody say, okay, so I changed my mind, and instead of skipping the next chapter, we're going to try to do it. It's not as bad as I thought it was. I read it over a couple of times over again on Shabbos, and I think it's worth a try. It's very interesting, and it's a little different, as Rav Moshe said, a little bit more abstract than usual, but the Yesod is an interesting Yesod. So we're going to start Maimer Yud Aleph, Malchut Te'afech Laminus, the page Pei Hey. That's where we're going to start. So Misayel El Rabbi Yitzchak, the previous brisa is a support for Rabbi Yitzchak. The Yomar Rabbi Yitzchak Ein Ben David Ba Acha Titapech Kol HaMalchus Laminus. Ben David is not going to come until the whole Malchus is turned into minus, is transformed into minus. Right? Minus, of course, is apicorsis. Amarava Mikra Kulo Hafach Lavan Taharhu. Interesting, this pasuk is said in the context of Tumas Tsaras, of a Tzara of a Mitzora. And we know that a Mitzora who has these white Simone Tsaras on his skin is Tame. It becomes a Mitzora because of, but there's an interesting halacha there that if it's totally turned white, the whole body is turned white, right, from the top to the bottom, as the Torah describes, so then he's Tohar. Very paradoxical thing if he's partially, even 95%, 98% tsaras, he's tame. Once he becomes 100% covered with the white skin blemishes of the mitzvah, then he becomes tor, and that's a remez to the idea that when the minus, right, when the malchus turns completely into minus, so that into epicorsis, so that's going to be the time when it'll become tor. We'll see. We'll discuss these things as we go along.
Is that a reason to hope for the Chilonim to take charge of the Malchut in Israel?
I think they did already. So I mean,
Okay,
we don't have to hope. We don't have to hope. It happened. Okay. 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 Minus he hefech malchus. So now we're going to discuss the relationship between minus and malchus. Why is minus the opposite of malchus? Okay. Why are these two things considered? Why malchus is the kingdom of Hashem, and minus is the not believing in Hashem. But why exactly are these two things related to each other? And it's based, and Moshe is going to give a whole shir based on a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, which is based on a pasuk in Mishlei, and we will see what's going on here. Okay, la aluka shtei banot.
Rabbi, can I ask a serious question now based on my joke?
Yeah, I can ask a serious question based on your joke.
Okay. Uh, this is clearly not the only way to get the Malchut David. In other words, we don't have to go to that, or is it?
Um,
I mean,
so I don't know. Again, it's something that I don't know. Um, but it's describing a situation. Um, you know, I mean, the world could have taken a lot of different turns, right? Adam Rishon didn't have to sin, and then there didn't need to be a cheta egel, and there didn't, right? And things would have turned out differently. And Chizkiyahu Melech could have been Mashiach, right? So yes, the world could have taken a lot of different turns. Um, are we? But we seem to be describing, our current situation. In other words, if we put a one-to-one correspondence between what's happening today and what's happening described in the Gemara, it seems that the Gemara was describing a situation and the worst case scenario of how it can turn out, but how at the end, again, the point that we've been making over and over again is that uh, that the new order is going to be based on the destruction of the old order.
yeah,
Um,
I guess my question could have asked it back then, weeks ago. I mean, but
yeah.
don't and
Okay. So yeah. So again, the Maral says over and over again that the old order has to be based on the destruction. The new order has to be based on the destruction of the old order. The question is, how bad, how that transformation happens. So again, I don't know the alternatives. I can't say that I know the alternatives, what could have happened, right? But that's but the Gemara is describing a process, and we're showing why this process makes sense, why this is a way to get there, and why and why the different pieces fit together. Um, you know, could Baruch Hu have run the world in a different way? Could man's free will have changed things and changed the course to be better than it is? Well, okay.
But like we want the coming of the Mashiach, right?
Yes.
So are we supposed to encourage the world to go downhill? No.
No.
That's a shot thing. So what is the purpose for our efforts? Where is the place for it? How does that come into it?
Well, again, remember the world exists on two different levels, meaning right? The history exists on different levels. There's national history and there's personal history, right? Meaning every one of us has a personally, right, has a responsibility. It was put in this world for a purpose, to fulfill a certain mission, and to keep the Torah and keep the mitzvahs, right? And and our individual olam haba is dependent on our free choices. The Kodesh Baruch Hu created us, so we are not free to throw off the yoke of Torah mitzvahs, as was done by certain, let's say, messianic movements like the Shapell Tzvi or some other movements that said, okay, we want to bring the Geula and let's just forget Torah mitzvahs because the way like you're suggesting. I mean, not suggesting seriously, but the meaning of your question. So there have been movements in Judaism that says, okay, the word let's throw off the yoke and we can help things move along, right? But we have an individual. God gave us mitzvahs. God gave us the Torah. God told us how to behave, and God told us how to behave even in the situation where things are getting worse and worse. Right? Okay, things are going about, but that doesn't mean it's hefkerus. That doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want, and we have our personal responsibility to keep Torah mitzvahs so that we will get to Olam Haba. Right? At the end of the day, we want to get to Olam Haba, right? Whereas Mashiach isn't the only thing that's happening. Mashiach takes place in the realm of the world history of the Jewish people, right? And but that's not the only thing that's happening. What's happening is that every Jew has a brit with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to keep Torah mitzvahs, and that's what we have to do under the most difficult circumstances. So Chas v'Sholem, Jews in the Holocaust had to keep Torah mitzvahs to the best of their ability. Jews experiencing spiritual decline or living in a world of spiritual decline have to try to do the best they can. But the course of history is going to happen with, sometimes despite our best efforts, things are still going to degenerate and become as what we're describing now.
Thank you.
Okay, so minusi hefech hamalchus. So it says here, La aluka shtei banot. What is an aluka? Right? For those of you know Hebrew, right? Aluka is a leech. Okay. And this is a pasuk in Mishlei. Okay, as we'll see. Pasuk in Mishlei says that it's a very interesting chapter. It's chapter 30 in Mishlei. You could either see the whole parts of the chapter which relate to this. But anyway, we'll talk about this. Who are these leeches and what does that have to do with us? Okay. But במאמר הקודם, in the previous shiur, התחלנו לדבר על הקשר שבין המלכוס והמינוס. We started talking about the kesher between malchus and minus. One of the things that we mentioned it last week, is that malchus is based on bechira, right? Because we mentioned the distinction between melech and a moshel. A melech is with the will of the people, with the agreement of the people. Moshel is a ruler who rules over the people, despite the will of the people. And so that was one of the things we said, that minus means okay, if there's minus does not believe in free will, so there can't really be a malchus. That's what we said last week, and now we're going to give a very different approach to the things, to maybe a deeper understanding of the connection between minus and malchus. Ubehekshir lezeh, in this context, yesh begemara avodah zarah la aluka shtei banot. Okay, Right. So the pasuk, we'll see he'll quote the whole pasuk in a little bit. But if you have a Tanakh, I didn't put it on the screen, but it's in Mishlei Perek Lamed pasuk Tezvav. Right? La alukash de banot. The leech has two daughters, literally, right? Have, and right, give. Okay. Right. So the leech has two daughters. Have, give. Shalosh heina lo tisbana. Right. There are three that will not be satisfied. Arba lo amruhon, and there are four that will not have, will never say hon. Hon here was described as sufficient, where some of the Mepharshim say. Okay, so it's describing this unsatiable hunger, kind of speak, like a leech is have, right? Give, and it says that and it's described in the pasuk that there are two offsprings of the aluka, meaning there's two different expressions. It comes to expression in two different ways in the world. So my have. What is so the Gemara? This is the Gemara, right? In Avodah Zarah, it says, what do we mean by have? Omar Mar Ukva, Kol Shtei Banot. It's the voice of two daughters. Shetzoakot mi Gehenim. Right? They cry out from Gehenim. V'omrot ba'olam hazeh have. And they say, in this world, bring. Right? Have is right? Shortened form of the verb have, right? Bring. Uman ninhu, and who are these? Minus v'harishus. This refers to minus, right? And rishus. Rishus here means the government. Right? We'll see, right? As it says in Pirkei Avos, have a zehirim b'rishus. Right? You have to be careful. You have to worry about the welfare of the government, because if it wouldn't be for the government, then Ishes Re'eu Chaim below, everybody would be swallowing up everybody else. So we need a kind of a system of rishus, and we'll relate this back to Malchus in a while. So we need a Malchus, right? That's one voice, one variation, and there's also minus. That's another variation. V'narchiv me'at be'inyan zeh. The Moshe says we will talk a little bit and expand a little bit about this ideas, what is going on in this Gemara. Okay. And we'll see how Moshe helps us. He sheds light on this very strange and kind of enigmatic Gemara. Ha'aluka hibria shemotzetzet dam. Okay. Leeches is a creature that sucks blood. Okay, as he's looking the footnote, right? These are things that Moshe said, which are kind of asides. Ubebatei cholim lifnei 70 ו-80 shana. Moshe was talking maybe 30, 40 years ago, right? But he says in the hospitals 70, 80 years ago, when they needed to heal and remove blood that was somehow damaged, they would put leeches. They would suck out the blood, which would become like a pus. So there was, of course, we all know that these were things that were very prevalent in the ages of our grandfather, great-grandfathers, right? And
it's still used for some things. They actually thin the blood somehow. There's some actual positive things from it. I think they use it today.
Okay, yeah, but say that again. Anyway, but this is Rav is just saying that drawing our attention to the fact that this is the nature of the aluka. This is what the pasuk is talking about. He avtipus. It's the archetypal bria of creation. Shemekabelet et hachiyut shela me'achiyut shel mishehu acher. Whereas it receives its chiyut, its life force, from somebody else's life. Ki adam hu nefesh, because as the pasuk says, the Torah says several times, dam is the nefesh. Ubo nimtzeit etzem achiyut shel adam. This is where man's life, his vitality is, his living force, life force is in his blood, right? Ukemavur betosvot, right? And it says in Tosfot, Shamotzi tipat dam b'Shabbos, chayiv mishum netilat neshama. There's a question about what's the av malacha, right? What's the av malacha of letting taking out a drop of blood on Shabbos, right? If you bleed, right? If you bleed somebody on purpose, you cause somebody to bleed. If you give somebody a bloody nose, and right, so it says there that you violated av malacha. There's a whole discussion in the Rishonim exactly what it is, but right, Tosa says it's netilas neshama, right? It's right, you take a little bit of life. Right? It's not not taking the whole life, but you're taking a little bit of life. And the Gemara Baba Kama uses there's a concept of kotla kula, kotla kala, kotla. You kotla palga, you kill halfway, the whole way. Okay, anyway, that's what it is. Blood is life. V'zeh me'ein habracha shel Esav. Okay, so here we have yesterday's parsha. We have the bracha of Esav. She'alav ne'amar b'al charbecha tichya. What was the blessing? Right, you will live by your sword. Klomar hachiyut shelcha titkayem mikoach lekichat chayim mimishu acher. The essence of what Esav is all about is that Esav's chayim, his life force, is taken because he kills other people. Right? Okay. So he says, look at Rashi and Shmos, because Rashi and Shmos says that why, as the pasuk teaches us at the end of Parshas Yisro, that we're not allowed to use a metal instrument to fashion the stones of the Mizbeach, because metal is something which shortens people's lives. And that's the cherev. Cherev is, right, a weapon to take other people's lives. And this is al charbecha tichya. This is what gives Esav koach. Al charbecha tichya. Okay. The al zeh mevuar b'Gemara. Okay, so now what is the Gemara teaching us here? Shel aluka yesh shtei banot. The leech, right, which draws its life force from the blood of others, Dahainu has two daughters. Dahainu shtei tzurot shel gilui ba'olam. There are two forms of it being revealed in the world. V'atchuna yesodit shelahen shekol achat tzoeket ten. But each one of these, right, it doesn't matter. Again, there's two of them, and we'll see. One will be the positive force, right, and one will be a negative force. But they both, right, call out constantly, give. Shel olam hi chasera v'tzoeket ten liod. Because they're always lacking, and they're always saying, give me more. That's the tzura of the, because in order for the leech to live, it needs to have a constant supply of more. Give me more. I'm lacking something. I don't have my own life. Right? See, other things have their own life. We all need food, right? But we have our life. We have our own blood, right? But the aluka needs your blood in order to, or somebody else's, your blood in order for it to have its life. It doesn't have any life of its own. It's always, right, dependent upon feeding its, right, from other people's life source, taking it for itself. The ashnayim heim, and what are the two? As Mar Ukva said, right, in the Gemara, maninu minus v'rishus. The two are minus and rishus. So he says rishus is malchus, and minus is apikorsis. Right? So malchus is always crying out, give more, and minus, and apikorsis is always crying out, give more, more. Ukira Pirish Rashi, and Rashi there in Avodah Zarah says, minus tzoekes havei tikrovet leavodas kachavim. Bring offerings to avodas kachavim, right, to false gods. Reshut, what is the reshut, which we're translating as the malchus? Tzoeket havei mamon v'doronot v'arnona masmach. Bring more and more taxes. Okay? So for all of us who have experienced having to, right, to pay more and more taxes, this is the This is the nature, right? The Malchus is never happy. The Malchus says, let's figure out another way to tax the people, right? Okay. Okay, so that's what Rashi said. Okay, so we have here we're setting up the picture. We have the minus and we have the Malchus and we have the minus. Malchus always wants more taxes, more, right, and minus always wants more, right, of what is our. Okay, but we're not going to go necessarily with Rashi's definitions 100%, but this is what Rashi says. Rashi is going to take this into a much, much deeper world of machshava, right, based on Kabbalistic ideas. V'divrei HaGemara stumim v'tunim biur. The words of the Gemara are very stumim, they're very closed, they're very impenetrable, and require explanation, and this is what we hope to be able to do in the next time that we have in front of us. Okay, so now we get into a deep Kabbalistic concept. Okay, this is why I was hesitating, right, and I didn't really feel that I had a handle on it, but I think we can read it and try to understand at least say the words and have some kind of a concept of what's going on here. Divrei HaGemara. Okay, the headline, the title of this paragraph is Yesod HaMetziut Chalal Reik. Right? The Yesod, the foundation of existence, is empty space, is a void, okay? A void. Okay. Divrei HaGemara kan nogim b'shorish hashorashim shel hametziut. Moshe says these words of the Gemara touch the root of the roots of existence. In order to understand, we got to start from the beginning. Even if they will be a little bit abstract. Mufshat is abstract, it will be a little bit abstract. And the footnote here tells us, Kamuvan, as everybody would know, Harav Ba Levayer Tchilat Abriya Kafi Shemavur Be'etz Chaim, in the Kisvei of the Arizal. Okay, so the Rav is coming to put into simpler words, right, to simplify for us who are not initiated into the world of the Kisvei Arizal and his Talmidim, what these ideas here. Okay, what are they? What's the basic idea? Hinei HaKadosh Baruch Hu bara et habriya ba'ofen. Because Baruch Hu created the world in such a way shekodem l'chol hanimtzaim, before anything that came into existence, nivra, before the creation of things that exist, nivra, there was created hechetimsa shel makom, a kind of a possible hechetimsa, a place, right? The possibility of a place, chaser, shel makom chaser. Right? Or as God created a makom chaser shetzarich lihitmaleh. And it has to be filled. In other words, the world was created within the context of a space which HaKadosh Baruch Hu created for the purpose of putting a world in that space. Okay. So we're talking, and he says, Lo chashuv karega safa chzik mikra. Moshe says it's not important what language we use, and in the Kabbalistic world, the different languages for this, some kind of a tzimtzum, some kind of a thing that, but we're not. If Moshe doesn't go into the technical terms, we're not going to go into the technical terms either. But that's the concept. Okay. V'zehu inyan hamakom shel habriya. We talk about the world. The world has a makom. The world has a place. The world exists within a makom which was emptied, which was voided, right, by HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to make place for the world. Because if they hadn't done so, then presumably there would have been no place for the world, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, fills everything. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu fills everything. Where are you going to put a world, right? So there has to be a place which is emptied of, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, and that's where the world is going to be. The world is going to be in that space. והבריאה עצמה, וזהו עניין המקום של הבריאה. והבריאה עצמה נמצאת ומתקיימת בתוך אותו מקום. The bria is in that, exists in that makom. Shehu be'etzem. So again, this is the very important line here, the concept which we're going to try to then apply to the leech and to the minus and to the malchus. So here we have to see what these words are. Shehu, right? This makom is be'etzem chisarum v'rekut hashoef lihitmaleh. It's emptiness, a lacking, a void, which aspires to be filled. The Baruch Hu created this empty space, but the empty space itself wants to be filled, doesn't want to stay empty. Nature abhors a vacuum. It doesn't want to stay empty. It wants to be filled. And we're going to talk about the two different ways that one could go about filling this void. One is the good way and one's the bad way. One's the malchus, one's the minus. But that's the direction that we're going at. V'chinat, and as it says in Pirkei Avos, ein lecha davar she'ein lo makom. I don't know exactly how he's using this. Everything has its place, meaning everything that exists, it exists in a place, meaning it exists in an empty place, so it fills a space. Right? Nothing exists without its existence serving to fill a space. That's ein lecha davar she'ein lo makom. It has a space, and that's how we have to understand the world. That the world that we know, the whole creation, fills a space which was created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was made an empty space. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if we're going to use the word tzimtzum, was mitzamtzem himself to put the world there. Okay, that's the fundamental idea here, which either we'll understand it, we'll say the words, and we'll try to understand it. But we'll see what he does with it. Okay, maybe we'll be able to understand it a little bit more deeply. So existence means filling the chisaron. Okay, in other words, that's what it means to exist. It means that I have this empty space which was created for the purpose of being filled, right? Being filled with things that exist. So we have to fill the things that will fill the space with things that exist, and then that's what existence is. Existence is that which fills the space which was created in order for things to fit in. Yes, Jory?
I'm just thinking how the analogy suggested of nature abhors a vacuum is just so appropriate and so striking. I mean, we see it in our own world. It's just like when there's a vacuum, it will suck everything in. It can't take having something that doesn't exist. It moves everything.
Okay, so but you're right. But that's in the natural world.
That's
right?
in the natural world.
But in the world that we're describing that it's got to be filled, but it's filled by the avoda of people. In other words, people, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us as partners, right, in this endeavor. That right, who's going to fill this void? Right? It's not going to happen, like nature. It's going to suck everything in. It's going to be filled by people, right, who are going to do acts of creation, or are going to make things, right? But the question is, will they do it in the mode of malchus or in the mode of minus?
Okay, and malchus in the correct kind of malchus, obviously.
Yeah, right, the correct kind of malchus or in the minus kind.
But I guess the point I was making is that it's mukhrach to the same level.
Okay.
Just like in the physical world, it's mukhrach, absolutely.
Right.
And similarly in the spiritual world, it's the same thing.
I would think you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
But, I won't say that it seems what you're saying is right, but let's see. Let's see what he says. ונמצא שכל מציאות הנברואים קיימים רק באופן שהם ממלאים איזה ריקות וחיסרון. The existence of anything that exists, right, is only right in a way to the extent that they fill some void which is there. Ublisha kadam lahem oto tzorach, and if there hadn't been already a need, right, something that needed to be filled, or b'makom shakol shalem, or if we were in a state where everything was perfect, was whole, right, and there was nothing missing, lo sheyach sheikanes davar, then there wouldn't be anything else, right? In other words, if there wasn't a need to fill the space, like you're describing, or if everything was filled, right, to capacity, so then lo sheyach sheikanes davar, then we wouldn't need to, right, to bring anything into it. Okay. Now he adds another point. V'yesh lahosif, and we have to add she'oto chisaron hu behechrach b'li gvul u'b'li tachlis. B'li gvul to tachlis is a way of saying infinite, without any boundaries. Tachlis here is like no end point. This is an infinite chisaron. Why? Because what was taken from here was a infinite existence, because everything that existed was Kodesh Baruch Hu's infinity, and if Kodesh Baruch Hu took a space, that means he took an infinite space, because every fraction of infinity is infinity, right? So he took an infinite space, and he took the infinite space, right? So there is an infinite lack, right? A lack that can't be filled by any means, because it's always it's an act which is unending. In Cain, hachisaron, because what was taken was Ein Sof. In Cain, hachisaron shenotzaru gam ken b'ligvul. So the chisaron is also infinite. V'hu la'olam lo yuchal l'hitmalei ad hasof. Okay. And now parenthetically he adds, right, because you could ask, what about Torah? Right? Torah exists, right? Torah existed even before the creation of the world, but he says no. Gam metziut shel Torah hi metziut shel tikun. Torah is coming to fix that which was lacking, the chisaron. Kamo Moshe Rabbeinu amar lemalachim, right? Because Moshe said to the malachim, right? What do you need the Torah for? Right? You have no jealousy, so you don't murder, you don't have any physicality, so you don't commit adultery, you don't kill people, you don't have jealousy, right? In other words, the Torah is there as a tikkun for a reality, right? Ubebchinat lo dibra Torah l'kenega yetzer hara, right? Ba'ofen she'Torah atzma ba letaken et hachisaron shel yetzer hara. The Torah itself comes to fix the chisaron of yetzer hara, right? Maybe it's a little bit of a chiddush, right, to say that, because one would have thought that Torah preceded the existence of the world, and I think there are sources that say the opposite. Right? I mean, and my Rabbeim taught me that it's just the opposite. Right. The reason is that we have parents is because the pasuk says "Kabedes avicha asimecha." There is a Torah that says "Kabedes avicha asimecha," so then God had to create a world with parents, right? Meaning the Torah preceded the existence of the world. Right? Yeah. So, right, the Torah. Okay, that was an idea that is prevalent in the base medrash, right? And Ramosh seems to be saying the opposite. Yeah, Josh, what do you say?
Rav Wolbe in Alishar Chelik Beis has a piece that says that the Torah of the Lochos Shnios on that level was purely a toppling for the Yetzer. That one can grab it to go higher, but it was the presentation of the form was brought on a level of basically toppling the Yetzer.
Right, but the question is, right, where Moshe was talking about the Lochos Shnios, Lochos Rishonos. I mean, Moshe is talking in the ideal creation of Torah. Right? Again, remember Moshe Rabbeinu's discussion with the Malachim was before the Luchos Rishonos too, right?
True, but again, the source in the Gemara on Shabbos obviously is talked about one level, but this may be a separate thought. And there's maybe
okay, Beseder. I hear. I mean, I'm just pointing out that there's a tzorich iyun here. Exactly the relationship of the Torah to the to our existence. In other words, is the Torah here to fix our existence, or is our existence decreed to be an expression of Torah because Torah preceded the creation of the world? And
Why is Moshe's opinion contradicting the idea that the world was created from the Torah? Couldn't we have had three stages, as it were? We had before Torah, we had Torah, then we had the world.
Again, but he's saying is, Moshe is saying is that the Torah came l'taken et chisaron shel yetzer hara. Right? That's what. So I don't understand this line. So clearly, to me, it's a tzarech and why it's necessarily true what he's saying. Okay, but okay, we'll leave that. If it was put into parentheses, I guess for good reason. So I don't know. So it's tzarech. Maybe I'll try to see somebody, ask somebody who could help us understand this. But let's getting back to the main sentence there. V'shoresh oto chisaron b'bria noveya midas hamalchus. Right. So there's a mem missing here. Either mishorish, that's probably more correct. Right. Mishor. That's probably how there's a clear letter mem missing here. Right. Umishorish oto chisaron bebria. Right. Novea midas hamalchus. There's midas hamalchus comes from that chisaron in the bria. Why? Ki hamalchus mitgala al yedei ha'am shechaser et hamelech v'tzarich oto kishlama lechisaron shenilkach. Right.
But what's
let me just translate it, okay? And then we can ask. Ki hamalchut mitgala al yedei ha'am, right? Shechaser et hamelech, right? The am needs a king, right? So malchus is right. How are we going to fill this chisaron? So we need a melech who's going to fulfill this chisaron. We'll see what the alternative is as well, right? But the way it's supposed to be is that we exist. We are the am. We're created in a world of a makom of chisaron, and how are we going to fill the chisaron? So the correct way to fill the chisaron is to try to connect with the melech who made the chisaron and is waiting for the opportunity to fill the chisaron, but as a result of our avoda, which we'll do through Torah and mitzvahs, through creating, right, will bring Hashem back into the world that He, quote unquote, abandoned, right, in order to be able to create the world. Right? That's what the sentence means. V'tzarich oto, and we need him. We need the melech. Ki hashlama lechisaron shel lekach. Right? How are we going to fill the chisaron? Right? We can't fill the chisaron unless, right, there is something the melech who took away, right, will bring back, right, that which he took away. In other words, what did he take away? He took away his presence, right, because right, in order for there to be a creation, right, which was other than his presence, he had to remove his presence to a certain degree. So he took away his presence, right? But we don't want to live in a world without his presence. Because Baruch Hu created the world to be such a world where where his presence will return, right? And that's what we're here for, and that's why we are here, because we're the am and ein, right? Ein melech below am and ein am below melech, right? We're the am that requires we need to have it to be fulfilled. We need it, right? Because we're lacking the presence of Hashem. Because when a person, right, looks at his reality, at his existence, and he said, without Hashem, I'm nothing, right? Without Hashem, right? I'm part of this empty void, right? But the empty void has so much possible content, right, which was removed. So how are we going to get it back? We're going to get it back. We'll see. That's the midas hamalchus, right? The midas hamalchus is to right, to re-put, right, replenish, right, to replace, right, replace not the right word, to put back in place the that which was taken. Okay, now, but here comes the main point where we're going to say, where does apikorsis come in? So that's the midas hamalchus. Because if there wasn't a if there wasn't a midas of apikorsis, if the leech only had one daughter, everything would be wonderful. Right? We would be always calling out, have, give, right? Because we're lacking. We have an infinite lack because HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed himself in an infinite way, and we're lacking. And so God, give us where we need more. We need more of you, because we want to have want to exist, right? Because our existence is lacking. But Elo now, but the other side of the equation is shebe'etzem hachisaron munach shtei efsharot shel milui. There's two possibilities of filling the need, right? And that's where the bad part comes in. Ofen achad hu, right? The bad part is, right? And now this is I'm going to describe the negative way of doing this. Ofen achad hu שבני אדם יכולים לתפוס את המצב של חיסרון כעצם המציאות. People will see this state of chisaron, this lack, this void, as being what existence really is. They will not see it as a place from which godliness was removed. Right? They'll see it as this is it. Right? What you see is what you get. Right? There's not. What's the world? The world is a place where everything which lacks everything. Right? But how are we going to fill that? We're going to have to fill it, as he says, the chisaron has to be completed, has to be filled from within itself. Okay? That's how people. This is the bad way of looking at it, right? Because this is it, right? This is all of existence, right? Is right in this world of chisaron, and we want to fill this chisaron. Nobody wants to live in a world of chisaron. Where are we going to fill it from? We're going to fill it from within itself. We're not going to look outside of it to some source, right? Which some godly source, some divine source, which was which created the world the way we understand it to be, by creating a void which that source will fill again. But it was created. This is it, right? That's the materialist way of looking at the world. This is it. There's nothing else. There's no God. There's nothing. There's no previous things. We're not in a world which the world doesn't exist within a broader context than what we see. And so therefore, what you see is what you get. This is the world. And so therefore, the fulfillment of the hashlama, of the fulfilling the world, is from the world itself. And we have to work to use the world, use creation to satisfy the lacks that exist in creation. Right? Because if we don't do it, right, it's never going to get filled. And so this is what we have to do. Aval, but ha'emeti, but the truth is, right? The chisaron has to be fulfilled from the true reality, right, which was removed. It's to return God's will, right, His presence, right, into creation, al yedei ha'avoda shel bnei adam, through man's efforts. Right? Ba'ofan, so in other words, this is what this really means. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sam otanu ba'olam shenedar megili kvod yitbarach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us in a world which is completely void, absent. Right, the kvod Hashem is absent completely. right, from any revelation of his kavod. Man has to recognize, acknowledge God's mitzius, right, as the true mitziut, and to show and to try to bring in the world of chisaron the revelation of God's kavod. ובזה היינו על ידי העבודה והשלמת החיסרון, right, אנו בוראים את המציאות שלנו בעולם. Right? We create our own existence, we create our own reality through through our avoda. Right? In other words, we take, right, we bring godliness into this world, right? We bring the Gilui HaKavod, right? Baruch Hu removed it, so to speak, right, to make place for human efforts, human endeavors, and we're going to bring it back, right? By Torah, mitzvos, right, by doing the will of Hashem, and everything that we do is a Gilui Kvod Hashem. And if we do it in the right way, if we dedicate ourselves to the fulfillment of our covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Memela, everything, the world will be restored to what it was, right? Which was, there was total Gilui, there's removal, and we're trying to restore to the total Gilui, which is going to be, right, in the days of Mashiach, right, there will be a restoration of the original Gilui, right? And then perhaps there won't be any more room for avoda, right? Because as it says that the Ramban says that the Yamim she'ein bahem chefetz, the days of the Mashiach, when there will be no chefetz, there will be no Yetzer Hara, right? Things will be different, and there won't be a need for avoda to fill the void. Right? But until we get to that point, we have to do the avoda is necessary to bring more and more Gilui Kvod Hashem, and the more Gilui Kvod Hashem that we bring in, this fills the emptiness which was created by Kodesh Baruch Hu's withdrawal. Right? But again, but the minus, as we'll see, right, is right. They're not. They don't have this. They don't have two worlds, right? I mean, it says that the minim only, right, the difference between our belief and the word belief of the meaning is whether there's one world or two worlds. Right? It says that the Mishnah in Bracha says that when the minim came around, and they said Ein Olam Elo Echad. So that's why in the Beis Hamikdash they said Baruch Hashem Olam Olam V'ad Olam. We said no, from one world to the next world. In other words, we emphasized in response to the minim that there are really two worlds. Right? There's really Olam V'ad Olam. Before the meaning didn't have to be emphasized. They were pushed that there's two worlds, that this world is a place, right, to create a shleimus of a world to come. But the meaning said no, only one world. What does it mean, only one world? So Ramesh is defining it in a deeper way. One world means that the world is self-sufficient. Right? That you can take, right, that you can know everything about the world in terms of scientific facts, and you can learn and supply all the world's needs are going to come from within itself. Right? You don't need any kind of divine, you don't need any kind of spiritual, you don't need any kind of things which will to help mankind reach its goal. Its goal will be to to fill the void, right, through man's own efforts, right, independent of any appeal to a midah of malchus which is outside the world. Okay, yeah, clear more or less. Yes, Mr. Jory. Yes.
Okay. So going back to the quote from Mishle, I'm wondering if this is the quote that I'm familiar with that ends in the English translation, and the third thing or the fourth thing, I don't remember, is the fire within each of us that knows not to say it is enough. Is that a different pasuk or?
No, that's the same. That's the same pasuk. The next pasuk.
Same pasuk. Okay,
the next pasuk. It's the next pasuk.
Okay. So,
pasuk. If you look at Mishlei, the next pasuk, Perek Lamed pasuk Tes Zayin, right? Ve'esh lo amrahon. Okay.
Ve'esh lo amrahon. Beseder. Okay, and this esh is what's inside of each of us. So the most materialistic person in the world nonetheless, he's got a fire within him. He has some kind of recognition that there's an infinite lack, and he has to fill it. I'm not saying he has it consciously. I'm just saying
Yeah, yeah, but that pshat that you're saying is not necessarily the pshat the Meforshim say, right? It may be a nice interpretation, but if you have, I'm looking at the Meforshim here, and you know, and basically again, the Meforshim put it a little bit differently. They say it's the Aish of Gehenna, right, and which burns, right, and will never say enough. Okay, we'll see. Rav Moshe is going to relate to the Gehenna. So, I mean, the interpretation that you're saying is, a nice interpretation. I'm not sure that that's the only interpretation of that passage.
Okay, all right, okay. So I'll abandon it for a minute, just for a minute, because I think it relates to this idea of an infinite lack. I don't care what you try to fill it with.
Hmm.
You try to fill it with something that's not infinite, and you're gonna feel the wind rushing by you all the time.
Okay, that's what we're going to say. In other words, we're going to say that if you try to fill it from within itself, it'll never get filled,
Right.
right? Because you can't fill infinity from the finite.
It's pashut.
Right. So
So
that's what Moshe is going to say.
I guess the only thing, okay. So, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the most materialistic guy in the world, who has his tevas and his whatever he has, right? He's never going to be satisfied. He's always going to hear the wind whistling in his ears, right? And he's never going to be content.
Correct. Correct. Right. And that's why in the material world, listen, the Gemara says somebody who has 100 wants 200, somebody who has 200 wants 400, right? There's no limit to trying, to the attempt, right? Right? And everyone's going to talk about that, you can have, $1 million yacht, but you want a $2 million yacht, right? Because it's
And,
there.
and to phrase it on the other side of it, as much as we try to have awareness that there's a God who's infinite and fills it up, by nature, we're this finite being that can't really grasp the infinitude. And so similarly, we will also have a whistling in our ear.
No, again, I don't think so. Right? I think that's already stretching it in the wrong direction, right? Because when we fill it, we fill it with real stuff. In other words, when we fill ourselves with Torah and the Malchus Shemayim, that's real. That's not imaginary. Right? The material stuff is imaginary, and that will never satisfy. But the spiritual will. In other words, that's a person who has the spirituality will feel, again, we're never going to reach the perfection in this world because there's always going to be more, and there's always going to be another level of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's possible.
And we're constantly in dialogue with our material self. You know, we have that.
We're in dialogue with it. However, we understand that our fulfillment will not come from the satisfaction of our material self. The satisfaction of our material self can only be an
Fine.
instrument, right, in helping us live in this world so that we can accomplish what we need to do with our Torah and mitzvahs. Right?
But we're gonna kept getting called back for breakfast.
Right? Not necessarily. Again, we'll be called back for breakfast, but the Chazon Ish's breakfast was a lot different than your breakfast. Right?
Mhm.
Okay. And so being called back for breakfast, as long as we're
But it
alive,
has some similarities.
but
It has
very,
some
very,
similarities.
very few, right? You know, Rav Steinman ate for breakfast, as I already said, crumbled, old bread in a bowl of hot water, right? That's what he ate for breakfast. Okay. Rav Steinman did not have a piece of cake from the age of 5 or 10 or
But it
whatever.
tasted pretty good.
Okay.
You're
Anyway,
starving. Yeah.
okay. But I'm just telling you is that you know we don't fill ourselves with we the
Right.
Gashmias is never going to be satisfying. It's always going to whet our appetites for more. Okay? The Gemara says about the.
Don't they say that about Torah too? You know, you're
Yeah,
never
there's
going to
always,
be satisfied.
yeah, but you're filled. You have a sense of being filled.
And what is this sense that says more?
There's always more. Okay, there's more, but let's try to finish up a little bit. But I hear your question. But that's the chiluk that there has to be between the
Oh
spiritual.
my.
The spiritual is real, and the
I guess what's driving me so hard about this is because I think this discussion can't, when he's giving his description of the universe and all that, he's not talking about the material universe. He's talking about the spiritual universe. In other words, the whole conversation seems to be taking place on a level in the realm of spirituality and not even talking about physicality.
no, that's not true. It's not true because
Mhm.
what he's saying about the Epicorsim, you determine what space you live in through your own bechira. You can either live in a material space or you can live in a spiritual space. Right? Again, we live in a mixture of both, but the two are antithetical to each other. That's what we learned in yesterday's parsha, right? Right? It says, right, that one there's going to be a constant struggle. We're going to get to Esav soon, okay? We're not going to get it today, but the Mirza Hashem, we'll have plenty of Esav time and Minos and another couple of pages of that stuff, right? But just it says right? The fight between Esav and Yaakov is constant, and it's a zero sum, meaning as one goes, as Rashi says, when one goes up, the other goes down, right? They both can't coexist, right? And to the extent that you live in a spiritual world, you do not live in the physical world, right? Again, nobody alive can be 100% in the spiritual world, and he wouldn't be alive anymore. But if you can be 90% in the spiritual world, you're living in a vastly different world than a guy who's living 90 or 95% in the physical world. It's a different world altogether with different values, different priorities, different things that satisfy you, different things that give you life, right? And it's a different world, and that's what we're describing. Okay, good. We'll stop here for today, my friends. Mr. Hashem, we'll pick up next week. Okay, good. Thank you for joining. Kol Tuv.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.